welcome back to another episode of Crazy Stupid Marketing, the show where we talk about all the things that other people are not talking about in the marketing arena and how we can bust some of the myths, can't pronounce anything today, and change some of the perspectives that people have been taught by the internet that marketing is, but maybe perhaps marketing is a little bit more than that. And so this is a show where we really use conversation to test out our ideas, try on new perspectives, and really explore through our thoughts and through our words what we believe about the topic of the day. And we have a very awesome topic for today. For those of you who know me, you know I use the word intentions all of the time. And so I'm super happy to have Nancy with me here today, not just to talk about generic intentions, but the difference between, I think we've all heard the phrase SMART goals. If you haven't heard the phrase SMART goals, go look it up on the internet or ask ChatGPT. They'll tell you what it's all about. But there's a lot of things we do in business in terms of goal setting, in terms of visioning and creating missions and KPIs and all of these things. And maybe they're lacking intention sometimes, and maybe we can add some intention back into the conversation. And so that's what we are here to do today. So welcome to the conversation. For those of you who are first timers, it's great to meet you. For those of you who are returning peeps, welcome back. We're always glad to see you. And regardless of your experience to date with setting intentions or goals or whatever else we're going to talk about today, because it's probably going to be a lot, please share your experience in the chat. We would love to hear your voice. And while this might look like a show where there's two people on stage having a conversation, this is an opportunity for all of us to get into the conversation, to, like I said, to practice exploring our ideas, our experiences, and how by the end of this 45-ish minutes together, we can have a clearer intention, boom, to use the title of the show, for where we're going next. So before we hop into the conversation, let's learn a little bit more about our fantastic guest today, Nancy Clarke. Give us a little introduction to you and why you decided that there was more to things than SMART goals, and you decided to develop this clear intentions program.
Okay, well, thank you, Tracy, and thank you. I'm happy to be here also, so I appreciate you including me in this conversation. So yeah, my background is actually in sales and marketing. That was my education, was marketing, and sales was sort of how I ended up developing my career. I was in sales support and sales roles for many years, and then moved into management and training and coaching. And so in all of those years that I was in corporate, is in these sales kinds of organizations, I am kind of an observer, I guess, by nature, and noticed that some of the salespeople and some people just sort of were able to get into a groove, and there was something that worked. And there was always SMART goals were a part of, yearly objectives, KPIs. There's always this conversation about SMART goals. So for people, just to briefly go over that, SMART stands for specific, measurable, attainable. I've heard a couple of different things on the R, whether it's realistic or relatable, something like that, and then timely. And so in theory, that always made sense to me, that SMART goals setting, in objectives based on that always made sense. But I also saw that it didn't have any kind of momentum. It never actually inspired and drove people. So I started to really think about this when I went into the coaching and performance optimization kinds of roles that I did, and noticed that there was a mindset that mattered to embrace the SMART goals. And so that's kind of when I came up with the clear intentions, and noticed that there was that something deeper that needed to be understood there. And that's what what clear intentions really does. So you kind of need to, and just to clarify definitions, because I think a lot of people might think goals and intentions are synonymous.
I was going to ask you that, so go ahead and go there.
And so how I define them as far as this goes is that goals are something that's measurable. It's the end result. They're execution, action based, logic based often, but they're the measurement at the end of something, whereas intentions is the start of something. And it's often more feeling based. It comes from our inner world, and SMART goals are set usually from an external motivator, and the goals are. And so, there's a long-term fulfillment that comes from intentions being met versus goals, which are more short-term based also, right? So just wanted to clarify, to me, those are two different things. And for this conversation, maybe we can keep that in mind.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I wrote it down, so I'm going to keep it in mind for sure.
Yeah.
But also, Nancy, I'd love to, just before to dive into the clear and what all of that stands for, how do you also see vision and mission playing into this? Because I feel like a lot of times people are talking about vision and mission, and they're not necessarily talking about intentions. So from your perspective, would you put those into the same ballpark? Have you often seen them being treated the same? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I do think that they are more aligned with the idea of the intentions. And I think what happens is that inadvertently and sort of unconsciously, what happens is that the SMART goals, or goals in general, KPIs and objectives and things like that are so much more measurable, become the focus. And so it takes away from that guiding light of a vision and a mission, or an intention, because I think that's usually what the vision and the mission statements of corporations or people, if they're entrepreneurs, like smaller companies. I think most businesses start with intention, and with that comes the vision and the mission of what drives them. But as we set these benchmarks, it over time, the benchmarks become the focus versus the vision and the mission.
Right. And we don't continually kind of quote unquote measure those goals and benchmarks against the intention and the vision. Yeah. They just become the repeatable thing that we do. Yes. And we stop asking questions.
Yeah. And stop checking that those goals are measurements of the vision being achieved,
right,
or the intention being achieved. And we get lost in the goals, and then just go into this bigger is better, more is better, bigger, better, faster, stronger kind of mentality that the goals, focus us on. Right.
Well, and it's interesting too, because I was having a conversation yesterday about data-driven decision making, and how if we're not measuring the data that's relevant, like to going towards our vision or our intention, then measuring all that data is mostly irrelevant, because there's lots of things in this world that we can measure, specifically in marketing. And if we don't know what our intentions are and how those measurements contribute, then, I mean, at the end of the day, they're definitely not KPIs, right? They're best case scenario metrics of sorts, but they're not even necessarily meaningful metrics. And I think Andrew's making a great point here about how people understand what the mission and vision is, because also once you get to a certain size of company, then you have people who are just doers, and they have to do the things I think about like the grocery store, and you have people who have to stock shelves, right? And their job is to stock shelves. Their job is not to understand the mission or the vision of the organization. And so how do you let that trickle down? And that's a conversation for a different day, because today we're not going to focus on all of that. We're going to focus on how do we set clear intentions in the first place? Because if we're not even setting clear intentions in the first place, it doesn't matter that we can't measure them throughout the organization, because they don't exist.
So, and just so you know, I was going to say, as a sales performance leader, the metrics matter to me too. I don't want anybody to think that I don't see the value in goals and metrics and KPIs, but they just have to be measuring the right thing, and they can't be the motivator in and of themselves, because they're external. And that's what ends up missing out on really motivating people, is that tapping into the intrinsic internal motivations, where somebody is inspired, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay, so we're probably going to keep coming back to this concept of motivation and inspiration. Because again, I think when we think about setting goals, especially SMART goals, right, I feel like maybe the inspiration and motivation component doesn't really exist in that model. So we are going to, it's not just clear, like I'm shouting at you that they should be clear to you. There's actually some breakdown of what
yes.
each of these letters means. So, Nancy, let's start with C. C is about being creative. I love this. So give us an overview first of what being creative looks like in intentions, and then we can talk about how do people actually get creative if they maybe haven't been creative yet.
Yeah, well, and this seems so obvious in the marketing world, is creativity, right? Like that's why I even went to school for marketing. Was I'm back in the day when advertising agencies were all the big deal thing, but it really was about wanting to express and be creative, right? And so that's really what what the C for in clear stands for, is the intention creative, and I love that quote, Albert Einstein, and maybe I'm not getting it quite right, but it's something like, creativity is seeing what everyone else sees, and thinking differently about it. I'm probably butchered that, but something along that line, right? So when you have clear intentions, there's a component to creativity. And I always joke, like, life hack, if you're doing something that is so repeatable that a machine can do it, it might someday.
It probably will. I always think about like the new version of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, where his dad is like, his job is to screw the lid onto toothpaste, and then he gets replaced by a machine.
Yeah. Well, and I have on my, on my different social medias, LinkedIn especially, I think I get these little pop-ups where people are saying, hey, if you want some content created, pop it into AI now. And
that's true.
So it's
AI can help you write this. And you're like, AI does not think what I'm thinking.
Yeah, but even something like that now becomes something that is repeatable and can be done externally, right? And so finding those ways to, what is the message? To me, marketing is about communication. And so finding creative ways to speak to your audience, but I think it's also finding creative ways to find your audience and understand what matters to them and what motivates them to be connected and engaging with your product or service in the first place.
Well, and I think this drives back to why there's so much value in being creative with your intentions, because I mean, it's pretty common now, I think, to just like Google stuff or to read a book and then try and execute exactly what is in that book, right? Like, I've worked for organizations who the entire marketing team or the entire leadership team has read the Rockefeller Habits, and now we're just going to like implement this exactly as the Rockefellers did in the 1920s, but with the tech company. And you're like, but it's not exactly the same. Right? We can learn things from that, but we also need to be creative with that when we are creating our intentions, because our business is in the market for a specific purpose, generally to fill the gap of some sort, right? People create solutions because they see a gap in the market. So if we're here to fill a gap in the market, then let's not forget that when we're creating our intentions for. And I mean, I do believe specifically we should use those intentions for marketing purposes, but this is also not just for marketing purposes, right? This
Yeah.
is like business intention setting level,
Yeah.
that when we have this kind of alignment from a business perspective, then sales and marketing can show up in conjunction and add value to each other. Imagine that. The like client success team knows how to take care of all the promises that marketing and sales made. Operations can deliver, right? Like we are in alignment, but also like specifically with the creativity, as you mentioned, Nancy, it influences a level of creativity into the DNA of an organization.
Yes.
And I think one of the things we saw specifically with COVID is that the most agile companies were the ones that were the most creative.
Yeah.
How can I still continue to serve my people? I can't serve them that way anymore. How can I serve them? What can I do? And the most creative companies won. And we're continuing to live in an ecosystem where there's a lot of unpredictable things, right? Economies are not specifically doing well. We've got like big government shifts happening in different like powerhouse countries in the world. And like this is going to continue to be a thing, probably permanently.
Well, and I think, the more we can understand, I like what you're saying there, the more that we can understand that, creativity is evolution.
Mm-hmm.
It's expanding information, using information. It's about different perspectives and looking at as Albert Einstein said, I found the quote, it says, creativity is seeking what others see and thinking what no one else ever thought. And so it's not necessarily that anything is new. So, going back to the Rockefeller, sure, there's something useful there, but have we evolved also, and what around it has evolved? And so, learning to understand that creativity is change, and change is evolution, and a lot of people are scared of change.
Most people, I think.
But to understand that change comes in the format of growth and expansion and evolution, right? So, and I think one of the things that I've seen happen in the marketing world is that there's a focus on image managing, in within the world of likes and reviews and how important that is. That now is a metric for the marketing world, that they're managing those metrics, and that can in some cases take away from that idea of creativity and connection, right? Which sort of leads into the next letter.
That's true. Before we go there, I also want to quickly touch on, because when you were talking about the definition of creativity, you mentioned the word expression. And so this is about like expressing. I want to just like, can you give us a little bit more of an understanding or a definition of what that looks like from a business perspective? Because I think a lot of times we forget that we have the opportunity to express ourselves through our business. And that's what it sounded like to me, but I'd love for you just to like kind of wrap that one up in a nice way.
Yeah, I think this really boils down to the kind of programming of our society and many generations of, it's a dog eat dog world, the competitiveness, right? And so when we're always benchmarking ourselves against competitors and creating a hierarchy, which is basically just another measurement again, right? It's a goal of achievement, etc. It has an external, again, reference point for us, instead of that internal piece, which is where that self-expression comes from, right? The uniqueness of it. And understanding that perspective. It's part of why equity and diversity is such an important conversation right now. It's not about, to me, it's not only about making sure that there's representation, but it's like there's valuable perspectives there.
Super valuable perspectives.
Yeah, valuable, and so how can we have each of those voices be brought together to share the message and communicate for that connection and self-expression, right? So I think that again, that understanding of intentions come from that internal place, and so does self-expression. And psychology suggests that we're not as motivated long term by the stick and carrot mentality that we've been taught for so long of reward and punishment.
Right.
That does motivate for a short term, but long term, it's actually creativity and self-expression and the freedom to do that motivates us. And so that's, I'm kind of a nerd about that kind of stuff.
Well, I love it. And we could go off on a whole tangent about expression, but we're not. We're going to bring it back. I just also want to pull into the conversation quickly something Andrew was sharing about making sure we have no assumptions. And I always think it's interesting because I would love to hear your perspective, Nancy. I don't know it's possible to have no assumptions. I think that we make assumptions, sometimes based on things we know, and sometimes based on things we don't know, and sometimes on things we don't know. And so I feel like it's not necessarily about not making an assumption, but being honest and transparent about the assumptions that we are making, so that if those assumptions end up being false, we can be like, okay, we're going to update these assumptions. They're clearly false.
Yeah, and the willingness to pivot with them, right? And I think I agree with you is that, we're beings of, built progressive knowledge within us, right? And so that's what assumptions are, is that, okay, there's a history or there's an experience here that I'm drawing on to move forward with. That's just human nature, right? But being able to be consciously aware of that, and that that assumption exists, as you said, and then if it no longer applies, pivoting with grace instead of feeling like, oh, that shuts down me or that shuts down someone else in the perspective. So assumptions, I think what the guest said, what was his name? Sorry, Andrew. Having assumptions, but being willing to drop them if they no longer apply, right? Is
right. And I think, and he's clarifying, he works in HR, so this makes sense. But he says assumptions can be dangerous, like why someone is not at work. Yeah, that's not, that's a full-on guess. Whereas like in marketing, often we make assumptions. I think, and I like to call them hypotheses, right? Like I think that my target market will respond positively to this. And I create that hypothesis and I go to market, and they may either prove or disprove that happens to be true. But it is about that being open to be disproven. And I'm currently reading a book by Matt Watkinson. If those of you who are listening do not follow him on LinkedIn, I highly recommend that you do. He wrote a book called Mastering Uncertainty, and it was talking about something that's scientific, quote unquote, goes to market trying to be proven false, right? So unless you have that totally like total permission to be proven wrong, then you've already like created some false assumptions in your program somewhere, because you're trying to like defend instead of trying to actually discover. So anyway, really good book. I recommend it.
Well, and can I just piggyback on that a little bit, because I think that leads to what shuts creativity down, right? Is fear. And so if we're wanting to foster an environment for creativity, we need to, there's the idea that in a survival mode, our brain does not tap. We don't tap both sides. We don't have whole brain thinking because we're focused on those goals. And sometimes, smart goals can cause a fear and put people into survival mode. So it's so ironic that this is the measurement, the achievement of success, but in and of itself, it actually shuts down people's creativity because they have a fear. Oh, if I don't meet my goal, I'll get fired. I'll I'll lose my customers, I'll lose my income, I'll lose, it's this unconscious fear, right? And so to open up creativity, we need to move into that homeostasis where we feel that we have time to express, we feel safe, and we feel the ability to be curious, and it's okay to make a mistake. And that's kind of what you were saying, right? Is that, that pivoting, and I have this hypothesis, I have this theory. If it's wrong, okay, that's just information.
Right.
It doesn't mean I'm wrong or bad, and which, can shut down the creativity if there's fear associated with that mistake, for example, right?
Right. And I think this concept of fear drives really nicely into the next part of the clear intentions, which is love based. So again, well, I love all of these, so I'll probably just say that for everyone. But like, I feel like there's been to some degree a filtering out of the concept of love in the workplace. So help us bring this back with some love.
Yeah, this is so interesting to me, because when I first created this, I used the word love. And to me, as you started to allude there, the opposite of love to me is not hate, it's fear. And so, but when I was, developing these letters, and I was kind of playing with the different letters that would express what I wanted to get across here, I brought this love, and my partner, who is he's very kind of engineering logic based. He's like, I don't know if that word's going to fly out there.
Getting a little too woo there.
So I was like, I did a slash on this one. I was like linking. Okay, can we link up to other people? Can we? But it's about connection is what this is about, right? And we're humans. We're creatures. We're social creatures, right? And so are we adding and providing love and helping others feel good about themselves? And I think there's so many messages, if you watch American TV, especially, I notice this, is that it's fear. It's very fear. The marketing is very fear mongering. And so maybe there's a place for that, but I think there's not enough of that. Like, what are we moving towards how are we moving towards connection with our messaging, right? And feeling more authentic and ourselves in that connection.
Right. And I always think this too is very much based in how we decide to show up as a business, right? Because there are fear mongering, pain agitating techniques that work for a lot of people, except like I've always found specifically for me, like I can't do that. One, like the solutions I provide are not time stamped. So to create some kind of like false urgency just feels fake. And like, I'm not about that. I'm about authenticity. And these are the things like when you tap into this. I mean, I personally, I love the concept of love, and I would like to bring more love back to the workplace. But at the end of the day, what we're all trying to be from a brand perspective is loved by our clients, right? Like we want our clients to love us. Yet when we're creating intentions and showing up on a day-to-day basis at the office, we don't have love as part of our intention or the creation of love. So, I mean, why would we expect our clients to reciprocate that if we're not willing to give them it? I think it seems unachievable.
I totally agree with you. And I think that, really using the question of what do we want our customers to feel when they interact with us and engage with our services and or products. What is, do we want them to feel scared?
Yeah.
Not usually. But I think a lot of companies, again, we've gotten away from the idea of what is that experience versus, well, we're building or making, I make this.
Right.
I sell it. Do you want it?
Well, okay, so this is actually making me think of, well, what I think is a really good example. You guys can be the judge. But horror movies, right? So horror movies are actually created to scare you
Yeah.
because people want to be scared.
I
And
like
so
that
what they do
experience.
and the way they promote them and everything shows you that if you watch this movie, my promise to you is that you will be afraid.
Yeah.
And so, like me, as not a fan of being afraid in movies and more a fan of singing in movies, I am not attracted to those things. And that doesn't make me wrong or the movie wrong. It just means that they are very authentic in their marketing. They're like, this is what we promise you. Do
Yeah.
you want this? And the people who want it are like, yes, I do. And the people who don't are like, no, I don't.
Thank you.
I don't know why I feel like I should have thought of this example years ago, but it's like such a good, clear message of what we're
Transparent.
promising you. And I think when companies, so now we're talking about, let's say you're selling shoes or you're selling software or selling something like that, and you use those fear-based tactics, what are you promising people? Are you trying to promise them being scared? Because
Well, I have an
I
example.
might attract a bunch of people who love horror movies.
Well, there's a great commercial on right now, which kind of like hits this on the snout, where I can't remember what it actually is advertising at this moment, but they are talking about these. It's a travel app or travel something like that, and it's saying these group of people meet in the lobby of a hotel, and they're like, well, I got the last room. No, I got the last room, and so each of, like, there's this like, oh, only 3 rooms left, and only, and that's the urgency, that false sense of urgency. But then people kind of are like, you're left feeling with a sour taste in your mouth about that interaction, because it was like, well, sure, I got my deal, but you kind of like trying to pull the wool over my eyes.
Well, and at the end of the day,
and so we don't feel good about that interaction. 100%.
And like, how many times are you going to do that again if you don't feel good about that interaction? This is your brand reputation. Then at the end of the day, we're talking about.
Exactly.
I'm out in the market making brand promises that are inauthentic to me and don't feel good for my customers. So it might get them to close, it might get them to buy, but will it get them to buy more? Will it get them to buy? Recommend?
Will I get a 5-star Google review?
Or will you even get any Google review because somebody is so indifferent to you? And this is the thing about reviews. I think most people get this, right? People generally review if their experience is really good or really bad. In the middle of the road, people don't even bother to put the effort into doing that. So if this was the goal, right, to get a bunch of 5-star reviews, one of what? Like, if we don't know what our intention is, then we don't even know what we want people to give us 5 stars for. But then once we do, and we have that based in our intentions and based in creating that brand love for our clients, then we can actually be worried about that goal or that metric, because we'll be doing things that can achieve it.
And to really use that question of like, what do we want them to feel as a result of their engagement or experience of our company, product, service, etc. What is that feeling? And then base the metrics around creating that feeling, and not have it be a byproduct of hustle and and urgency.
Because just doing a lot of things won't generate love for your organization. And it's also like, this is one of the reasons why marketing has to be iterative, is that how I experience love is not necessarily how Nancy experiences love or how Andrew experiences love. And so if I want to create love in my clients, I also have to figure out, like, what does that look like as in terms of an expression of love? Does it look like a recommendation? Does it look like a 5-star review? Maybe I think it looks like a 5-star review, but most people aren't as excited about doing reviews as Tracy Borson. I do reviews for everything. But like that doesn't even necessarily mean that you failed at that. It could just be that the metric isn't doing a good job of tracking
Yes, exactly.
your version of love.
And also, the other piece of it I think is important to understand is how not just love for the company, the love that you're feeling from the customer or to the customer, but how is love showing up more in their lives? Because it's about connection, right? So does our product or service allow them to feel more connection to the people in their lives? Because that's what motivates most of us, is finding ways to connect, right? Whether it's with
this is super interesting because I mean, Andrew's sharing too, we strive for connection.
Exactly,
and we love to be loved. But so interesting because I think a lot of times, and again, I'm going to state this and we're going to move on to the next thing so we don't run out of time. But
we have love.
When we think about creating connection, and I think about a lot of how specifically tech companies advertise, right? Like we're trying to get a whole bunch of people to like try our free demo, but like maybe our product is about connection, but maybe our product is not about connection. And at the end of the day, people still desire to feel connected to something. And how is your company creating connection? And then create an intention around that. All right, so let's go to E, which is ecological.
And so when I have, share my program on this, ecological is actually twice the time because it's such a big topic. But basically what ecological means to me and in the concept here is it supportive of and supported by other pieces that are connected to it. So in the corporate world, what that would look like is, does the marketing message, and you kind of touched on this before, are the messages that are going out and the information that's being received through the marketing team, does that support the other components of the company? And is it supported by the other components in the company? And so is there cohesion there in the message and the intention and the way that it moves forward? And then the other piece of it, again, so there's two pieces for each of these, is how it works inside the company, but then also how it works with the customer and their experience, right? And so does your product and service scare them more? And does it shut down other parts of their life? And how this, I think, works sometimes is that I saw this lots with salespeople that I worked, especially new salesperson. They actually had an idea of, how hard they needed to work to, especially commission sales. And so they felt like they needed to work to get the commissions. And there's a part of them that wants to do that, but there's another part of their life but I really want to be with my family and I really want to spend time with my kids, etc. And so the two messages within them aren't supporting each other, right? And it's sometimes unconscious, but how do we help customers to feel holistically healthy with the engagement of our product or service, right? And I even saw a very big name, Tony Robbins, is like, oh, the world is so scary, it's a scary place. And so he was actually using fear to get people to buy his program. I'm not saying anything against Tony Robbins, but I just thought that the way that he was marketing that was, hustle harder kind of mentality, which people are wanting connection again with their families, and you're sending them two different messages, right?
Well, and I think too, there is a point where individuals have to be able to say, like, I don't want to only have a career or only have a family. I want to have both. And how do I create that? And I would love if more organizations were having that conversation about how we can support that. But so as even if, like, I always think from a corporate perspective, sometimes we create space for people and people are not ready to enter the space, right? They haven't done enough of the work to have the conversation. And that is what it is. It doesn't mean we should not offer the space, because the space is not offered. But the point is that we are always trading. Actually saw a post on LinkedIn earlier today. My friend Dave Kearns, who like quit his job in Toronto during COVID and moved to PEI. And it was talking about the cost. So he went for an early morning swim, and what was the cost of that? And like all of the things that he had to trade to make that possible. And now, like, for his stage of life, that is a trade, that is a good trade for him.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, there's always something that is, I don't want to necessarily say trade. I don't want to talk about like work-life balance and things like that, but things are connected, and things will always be connected.
Yes.
And to have a team of marketers that are, I've seen this more than once and it makes me very sad, but a team of marketers who are so busy doing things, but they don't see the results of the things that they're doing.
Yeah.
Generally because there aren't clear intentions. So folks, if that's your struggle, connect with Nancy. But like though that's a daily trade that those people make. And it's actually one of the reasons why I ended up leaving corporate, because I was like, this trade is not good for me. It's not healthy. And I'm not going where I can go if I continue to make that trade. And then organizations lose good people because they don't have they don't have an intention behind that, right? To create business intentions that take that into consideration. So I think this, and I do think that it ties back to the concept of connection, right? This belief that things are interconnected. And if we're not being realistic with ourselves, that there is an ecosystem of things here that are tied to each other, that impact each other, and we set our intentions or set our goals without that in mind, then the only thing we're doing is creating opportunities for those connection points to break.
Yeah.
And when we talk about things
get in each other's way.
Yes, yeah. Sales, marketing, actively acting against each other, very common. There's just like marketing making brand promises that then can't be delivered, right? Like, and I've said more than once, like, I refuse to make a brand promise that I don't think can be delivered. So if you're telling me we can do this, but I haven't seen it be possible, I am not going to go to market with that. I do not feel good about that. And so, I mean, again, I think we could go into like a lot of detail on that one, but we have 2 more to go, and we're done in like 2 minutes. So hang in there, people. We're gonna get to all of them. Okay, A is abundant. Oh, I love this one. So tell us about abundance, Nancy.
So this is one of I think I'm saying the same thing. It's one of my favorites too. But it's really about, does the messaging, in the marketing world, I think about this is messaging about limitations, or is it about expansion again, right? So, if we're again going back to that fear-based, limitations, comparisons. So I have 3 common limiting beliefs that are counterintuitive to abundance. So if you have any of these functioning, then that abundance that you're looking for, that experience of abundance in your life, which is, what you need when you need it, and the freedom of expression, etc. So that's kind of what abundance means to me. And so it's scarcity, urgency, and hierarchy. And so scarcity is the belief that resources, money, etc. is limited. And that's kind of what that Tony Robbins, you're afraid of not having enough, right? And so how do
Right.
we encourage people to feel abundant and safe and things like that, or to move towards that feeling of abundance? Because that's what we want, is that feeling of abundance, right? Connection and abundance. And so urgency is the idea that time is limited.
Right.
And I mean, Albert Einstein again taught us that it's relative, right?
I always say you have as much time as you think you have.
Yeah. And so, and then hierarchy is the idea that you are limited and therefore have to compare to someone else, right? And put yourself, and so, when I think about that idea, does the marketing, does the messaging, does the product even appeal to limitations versus expansions and feelings of expression and openness, right?
Right.
And so I think that, it's very, very common for messages to appeal to limitations.
Mm-hmm. This is, the urgency one, I don't think we have to pretend nobody's ever heard that one before, because specifically for marketing, there's always, it's Black Friday today, only available until,
Yeah.
I love to do my radio voice. And scarcity, I think you hear a lot of life coaches talking about it, right? And they're talking about abundance versus scarcity and lack, maybe people will use as well. But I think a lot of times when we are in the business conversations, because we're going for more revenue and blah, 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 that we don't investigate how there might be mindsets of scarcity behind those things. And I would say a lot of the times there are. And
we're raised on scarcity mindset, like as a culture, it's pervasive. And I don't want to say that that's for everybody, for everything, because this is definitely shades of gray. There's degrees to this, but it is pervasive messaging in our families, in our society, in our cultural messaging of scarcity.
Yeah. Save more, earn more, love more.
Yeah.
It's always, very pervasive.
Yeah.
The hierarchy one is something that I had never thought about before. So this is one is fun for me because it totally is tied to your limitations as an individual person and what the limitations that you might put on yourself for how you can perform. And I think even too, this is relevant for people who are freelancers or fractional support systems, even with fractional CMOs, fractional VPs of sales, or people are like, well, now I got to put myself into this part of the box. And I'm only allowed to perform in that part of the box. And I always think this is so short-sighted. I don't know all of the value that a person can bring when I put them into a job title, right? But I can be open to experiencing their value regardless of what part of the hierarchy they are in. But this is still very much, again, just kind of the societal expectation about the hierarchy, right? You do not want to overstep your boss, right? Because you'll probably get fired.
Yeah. And it's not even about hierarchy as far as that military kind of hierarchy. It's also just about competitiveness, a competition too, right? So we create a hierarchy and we're measuring ourselves against other people, right? Do I look young enough? So there's products to help me make me feel younger or look younger, because in order to create connection in the way that I, attract somebody that I want to attract or whatever, feel good about myself within my friends or feel accepted, I need to look a certain way or I need to have a certain product. So it's that competition base. And then within the company, so that's the customer side of it.
Right.
Within the company, it's how are we, who are our competitors, and will they have that focus on, having certain percentage of market share or whatever, instead of and using that goal, that external goal, as the benchmark of success versus have we created the feeling that we want with the people and are taking care of that, the people that work for us. So that's that ecological piece tied back in there, right?
Right.
And are we focused on that, or are we focused on that external competitiveness and number of, market share that says that we're successful?
Right.
And that can come organically if you just are focused on a healthy product, that not health product, I mean, but like in the way that it interacts with people, that it
Right.
helps them feel good, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
It's interesting too, because I remember having this conversation at a market once with this lady who was like, I can make you look younger. And I was like, you are assuming that I believe, like, I bought into the societal norm that I should look younger.
Yeah.
So I see what you're doing there. And the thing is that, like, it resonated. We're going to go to R, which is resonate. It actually created dissonance with me instead of resonance. And so, again, while there might be a lot of people who buy into that, it will never be all people who buy into any one thing. So let's talk about the R here. Let's talk about resonance, and what does it actually look like to create something that resonates?
Yeah. So, and I think that word that you use, that dissonance, that's what all of these letters, if you peel away the layers, it's preventing dissonance both within the corporation and also with the customer and their feeling of the product, right? It's reducing that as much as possible so that there's this really clean feeling that employees have, that the customer has, etc. And so that does connect to the R, which is, does it just resonate? Does it feel good in your body, or does it feel bad? And so we have those feelings of, good feelings are happy, freedom, openness, etc. Then we have these bad feelings, which are scared, smallness, fear, and which one are we creating with our interaction with our employees within the company and also with our customers, right? And so I know this is something that, your company that matters to you as well, is it has to feel authentic, right? And so that's what this is really, the R is about, but practicing what does that feel like,
right?
Inside your body takes a minute, and you have to have some breathing space to do that, right?
And I think even just like conversation space too. So I'm thinking about like management offsite meetings and quarterly planning meetings where we spend so much time creating KPIs and all of these things, but very rarely like say something, right? Like, I want my sales team to make 125 calls a week. And we don't like stop and think, like, how does that feel for me?
Yeah.
So like, if I had to make 125 calls a week, how would that feel? Would that feel like a lot? Would that feel like I have time to prepare? Would it feel like all of these things? And give ourselves the opportunity to put these things through our personal filter to say, like, what do I think about this? And unless we're creating that space, we don't even have the knowledge of what resonates and what doesn't. We have covered it up with busyness, and now we have lots of things to measure and lots of goals and all of these things, and then we get to the end of the quarter and we probably haven't hit our goals, and then we set the same goals for the next time because we didn't take the time to ask the question, why didn't we reach this goal? What feels wrong about that? And
it ends up being,
again,
whose fault is it versus what felt wrong about that, right? And it's, again, that goal, which should be a measurement of that internal motivation, right? And so the resonant part is really focusing on that, what feels good inside, right?
So Nancy, I want to ask you this, because I feel like a lot of times I don't specifically think when people are actually doing the intentions work that this happens, but when people are looking at how to create a mission, how to create a vision, how to set goals, and these types of things, and I think about some of the things that I know, one-page strategic plans from gazelles, and the tools that are good tools, and the tool itself is not bad, but it doesn't have that layer of creating resonance, and it doesn't allow us as business owners or business people to create the skill of asking, what would we do? What resonates with us? And just because the Rockefellers do it or scaling up organization does it, does that mean that I want to choose this? Because I think a lot of times when it's something that's, I mean, I've done most of the Dale Carnegie training, right? That has been pretty, it's been a training program for a long time. There's a lot of businesses that use the practices. And again, it's not that they're bad practices, but do those practices align with you? Personally, I've had the experience where the practices very much align with me, and I try to bring them back to my organization, and I realize that they don't align with the organization. And then what I realized is that I didn't align with the organization, and that ended up how it ended up. But like, I think this is the short-sightedness of not looking at resonance and taking that time to take a step back to ask, how do we feel about this? And while we're trying to leave our feelings at home, right? We don't bring our feelings to work.
We do. We're just supposed to hide it, right?
Well, we're supposed to pretend that we don't, because
and that's,
it's somehow possible to actually leave your emotions at the door.
But that discord of expectation is part of what causes challenges, right?
Yeah. And I think, I mean, we are running up on an hour here, so we're going to wrap this up because, again, we could talk about this for a very long time. But I think the point here, and the point in really all of the crazy, stupid marketing shows, is these principles that we talked about today, being creative, love-based, taking a look at our ecosystems and what is abundance and what creates resonance for us from an intentions perspective, that will look different on every business, because every business has different people, it has a different why, and therefore has a different DNA. So if I'm actually going to create clear intentions that are relevant to me and not copied from someone else, they are going to by nature look different than someone else's. So Nancy, I'd love to, as a final kind of synopsis here, just get a wrap up of like, what do you have advice for how to move through that for the first time? To say, like, I've been using all these industry generic goals for 10 years and they haven't gotten me where I want to go. And so now I think, like, all these things you're talking about, it makes sense, but it's going to look very different. So any last tips from a like mindset perspective on how we can prepare ourselves for something that is new?
Yeah, I think that the one thing that I would say the first step about that is going back to urgency, because this is a mindset shift from the 40 some years since SMART goals were documented. I think they were sort of being practiced even before that, less specifically, but it's creating space for that mindset. So reducing urgency, believing that there is time to turn the dial in, to connect in, I would say is probably the biggest key thing there, and allowing for it to be that process to turn it in.
Yeah. And I think, again, I'll say it again, this is one of my favorite things that I'm pretty sure I came up with it, is that you have as much time as you think you have. So if you think you have no time and everything is urgent and everything is on fire all of the time, then that's what it will feel like. That is what will manifest. And if you feel like I have time, I have enough time to do what's important, then you will make time to do what's important. And again, at the end of the day, this is really about, like, if you've been setting SMART goals and you feel like you have not been achieving your goals, it's probably because there's something missing from a clear intention perspective. And it might be all of the letters of clear. It might be one of the letters of clear. It could be simple enough, although it's all mindset stuff. So mindsets are not necessarily simple to shift. Even for mindset peeps, it can be difficult. So like, this is one of the things where I really believe it's super valuable to ask questions, right? If you are joining us, I mean, Andrew was in the chat today, but I know more of you are out there not asking questions. But if you have questions and you want to like get into the conversation, try to understand what you might be missing from a clear intentions perspective, connect with Nancy, connect with me, connect with Andrew, who's in the chat, connect with each other, right? This doesn't even have to be like, I need to get professional help from somebody. The point is to ask questions, get into the conversation, try on the ideas, what makes sense to you when you're talking about creativity and intentions or resonance with intentions, or does that not make sense, or are you defining something one way and we're defining something a different way? This is where all of the exploration can take us. It can help us to broaden our experience and broaden our perspectives so that we can find things that actually work for our organization. Because if we're just out there doing marketing stuff and we haven't done this foundational work, we're going to continue doing marketing stuff that probably is not getting any kind of results. And for those of you who know me, I am not about that. So please don't do marketing just to do marketing. Please do marketing as a revenue generating activity. And if it's not generating revenue, it could be generating revenue. So let's figure out how it could do that. Nancy, before we sign off for today, if people have more questions for you about clear intentions or how you support people from a sales and marketing perspective, where is the best place for them to find you?
Probably on LinkedIn is the best place. I don't know if I can drop my email or something, but LinkedIn is the best place probably for now. And yeah.
Yeah, and if you want Nancy's email, connect with her on LinkedIn and ask her for her email. Tell her you saw her on the show and you'd like to learn more about clear intentions. This is, as you probably could see from the conversation, there's a lot of little different side tunnels that exist in all the pieces of this conversation. And it would be cool if it was as simple as like CLEAR. Boom, I'm doing clear intentions. But there are other things that will come up on your journey towards that. And the best thing to do is create a community of people around you who want to be in the conversation and can help you build what that looks like for you. So connect with Nancy, connect with me. Nancy's tagged in this post. So if you need to, like, you just find the post and click on her name and it will take you to her profile. Very, very easy for you. But let her know that you saw her on the show, because then she'll know the background of why you're connecting with her. And that's it for today. Thank you so much, Nancy, for sharing so many golden nuggets. I just like, my page is full of notes. We will have lots to talk about after. Thank you, Andrew, for being in the chat. Always a pleasure, my friend, to see you in the chat. And thank you to everybody else who's watching. Thank you to everyone who's watching the replay. If you happen to have questions and you're watching the replay, pop them in the chat. We will come back and we will look and we will answer. Or connect with me and Nancy and we can answer them directly for you. Although if you put them in the chat, then everybody gets to see the answers, which is kind of nice. And stay tuned for more episodes of the Crazy Stupid Marketing Show, always at the same time, same channel. You can find us busting myths about marketing and making things realistic instead of just the easy button, because it doesn't exist. Until next time, peeps, permission to do you.